October 11th, 2025. Kind of part two. Earlier today we got buffered. I don't know what the cause of it was, but it was about 42 minutes in. And I don't think we had talked about everything, although we might have. So consulting my notes. And I guess we'll give people time to show up. I didn't send out a live notification. I'm actually pausing here because New Mexicans can't drive in the rain. When it gets really bad, I'll pause somewhere and let the bad drivers get off the road. But we were talking about this 33rd episode of Thought Crimes, where Charlie Kirk is describing how he is in favor of live televised executions. And then a guy named Tyler fills him in. Oh, the last execution in France by guillotine was actually September 10th, 1977. So you got a guy named Tyler referencing September the 10th and an execution involving obviously an injury to the neck. Blood gushing out of the neck stump. But what we have here with this is a participant in a PSYOP participating in what would be described as predictive content or programming for the future event. So it's all entirely the same exact code. Again, I don't get into translating numerology or any of that stuff, but the patterns are what they are. And at this point, and that's why I think this is such a strong piece of evidence here for what we're describing, is at this point, the pattern is undeniable. You would be a reality denialist to not include this in your assessment of media. And if you're not there yet, you're probably overreacting. You know, people still think it's controversial to say that Charlie Kirk's still alive. But if that's not your starting point, your outmoded method for processing the news media has got you stuck in a box. Because that's what it is. I think I brought this up earlier. Not noticing the systemic media manipulation is like not noticing lies. Like lies throughout your life. Like, no, we're an inherently dishonest species. I mean, we're a bunch of liars. Not intentionally for everybody, but yeah, lying is a huge part of it. It's about collective agreement and different worldviews and perspectives, all trying to get on the same sheet. And like everything else in this world, it's kind of might makes right. And the dominant paradigm has been established by those with all the power. It's a monopoly. What's up, John? Junders, plain decoded. Let's go. So if you didn't catch it, that last bit, again, it's episode 33 of a podcast with Charlie Kirk. So you combine that with Erica Kirk and Emerson Drive, and these movies are incredible. These movies that are connecting themes, names of characters, and even the actress involved across two of these films. And a lot of the scenes overlap. And it all overlaps with Charlie and Erica Kirk. And, you know, the idea that this was all cherry-picked or selectivity bias, yeah, that explanation no longer suffices. That's not something you could accuse us of. You could not recreate this. It wouldn't happen on the random. What it does is it reveals the intentionality here. Long-term planned event. Further reason to doubt that Charlie's actually dead. But it explains quite a lot about people like, you know, the Candace Owenses out there. Or now, you know, a big thing right now I've noticed is engagement bait. The what do you see crowd is out there. So you got these massive channels, millions of followers that just talk about chemtrails all day. Well, now they're out there and they'll show a clip of the Charlie Kirk thing. And they'll say, what do you see? And they're just getting a bunch of clicks. And people are like describing what they see, what are you trying to say? Well, they do that to get engagement. So now it's basically engagement snuff. Because they think this is real. They think it's a real killing. So you got these people with big channels like, okay, I'm watching a man get murdered, Let me take a clip of it and try to get some of that X money. Some of that X monetization. These engagement farmers are the worst. Plain Dakota says it's all done by Tucker's demon. Yeah, maybe Tucker's demon ripped a hole out of his neck. You know, Synchro Morpheus put together a great video. He watched Heads of State, and the actress who plays the blonde girl who is next to Charlie Kirkland when he dies, she becomes Vice President Kirk. And in that series, she gets shot in the neck and falls just like Charlie. Well, there's a third one. In The Tempest, the widow who represents Erica Kirk at the very opening scene gets shot in the neck and falls over. But it's part of a dream sequence where she's dreaming of being her husband. But the widow's dream has her getting shot in the neck. So you have these overlaps between these films encompassing, 27 years from one to the other, with the music video right there in the middle. And then the event itself. But the pattern is what we've picked up on, and what the pattern actually reveals. What are the implications here? And this is the big pill to swallow. This is what people are going to have to confront, because this is the paradigm shift. The historically significant world-changing events are all staged and planned long in advance. And I know I'm saying all, it's a generalization, but yeah, let me know which one wasn't. Let me know what major transformative event that the media focused on and hyped wasn't a total contrivance. Like, good luck. I think the thinking in Trutherville has been very limited to the now. Like, okay, this PSYOP's played out, let's talk about the next one. And they're always after the next one, the next one. A couple of weeks ago, someone's like, I got Charlie Kirk fatigue. I'm like, we're just getting started. This is a generational PSYOP, and it's designed to create this new nationalism on one side, but also a new generation of conspiracy theorists. Just what the JFK thing did. They created alt media. The alt media is a deliberate creation of the power elite that have the dominant paradigm on lockdown. So you've got the mainstream and the alternative coming from the same source. But this has been very educational, because now it's very clear that the oldest instance of predictive programming for an event is a good indicator of how long in advance it was planned. Somebody just messaged me, and I got to look this up. Some movie from 1951 about a guy named John Kennedy trying to stop the assassination of Lincoln. And I think his girlfriend's name is Ruby D. But like Jack Ruby, Lincoln, Kennedy. This was 12 years before. And we've already discussed Manchurian Candidate and this whole creation of the mind-controlled shooter directed by John Frankenheimer, who was there at the White House, who drove RFK to his death at the Ambassador Hotel by a mind-controlled assassin. I mean, we've noticed this, that every PSYOP is essentially a scene in our history books that they're going to execute on the world stage. And they employ the best writers and directors. They get every one of these areas of media, all these propaganda conduits involved. And they foreshadow it. And the more time they have, it seems the more nuance they can put into it. Synchro Morpheus had noticed this baseball player, initials CK. There's the date behind him, 7/10. And I don't know if he got hit in the ear or something like that. There was something with this guy. But, it was like, what explains this? Because people are like, man could not have done this. Well, no, if you're looking at this from the proper perspective, that if it's planned decades in advance, you've got the big story, broad strokes. As you get closer to the day, you can get increasingly nuanced. And what we're talking about here are examples of product placement for the incoming PSYOP. And what does this do? Why would they saturate the media environment with these numbers and these motifs, these symbols? Well, it all goes into your frame of reference, which they act upon later. A good example of this is look up the movie Focus with Will Smith. Look up Focus, Will Smith, and the number 55. What they do is they're trying to influence a gambler to bet on player 55. And the way they do it is the entire day, they put the number in his frame of reference in multiple modalities. So he sees it, he hears it. I think he's from China or something, but they play in the background "Sympathy for the Devil," where in the background, the woo-woo background chant is actually 5-5-5-5. So they're showing how they create this echo chamber around this guy where everywhere he goes, there's 55 of this, the number 5 here, the number 5 there. Well, he's not consciously recognizing any of it. He processes none of it. But that doesn't matter. Propaganda isn't asking for you to notice it. It just has to saturate your frame of reference, and then it can be tapped into. It's like the misinformation effect, where they get you to recall memories and they throw in some confusion, they add on to your memories. They can manipulate your memories with the misinformation effect. You know, the Mandela effect is the application. Some say malicious. I would say malicious. It's the application of the misinformation effect. Gaslighting, mind effery, altering memories, so that the Mandela effect people, they're not liars. They truly believe it. But that's because their memories have been toyed with. So in Focus, what you see is an example of somebody who's hit with targeted messaging to influence his opinions or his choices. And then when it comes time to choose which player he's going to bet on, he chooses number 55. It's a great sequence, but I think it's kind of a tell. It's kind of a big reveal. Like, this explains why you've got the big story, the names, the major facets of the story, but then you throw in all kinds of other stuff, random stuff, everywhere and anywhere. And that's why I was looking at podcasts. Charlie Sheen, Joe Rogan talking about JFK, Charlie talking about getting sniped, Joe Rogan says nice shot, and then they find out about Charlie Sheen. Very consistent pattern here. So the fact that Thought Crimes episode 33 would have a reference from a guy named Tyler to a televised execution on September 10th, like, yeah, that's typical. Kenley, thank you for joining. Here's your blue wrench. Andrea says, hired agitators, radicalizers, inserted into the people going like, yeah, you know what? That's another thing too. They use so many shills to build up the peer pressure. They manufacture a consensus. Okay, so there's been a few videos that have come up in the last couple of days that I'm going to have to put into a separate upload, where there's one individual who's smirking or something. He's kind of shady looking, but they're recording this guy, and in the background you see two of the witnesses, who later, one of the witnesses is talking, and I think they interrupt him. But you hear what appears to be witnesses rehearsing their response. As in, okay, 1, 2, 3, and then I saw him get shot, and he fell over, and there's lots of blood. So you have this clear example of what appears to be somebody rehearsing their lines. And we've seen this before. You know, David Hogg, shout out to David Hogg, rehearsing his lines on camera. And there's the guy who asked the final question. And the question itself was somewhat ironic about mass shootings and gun violence. Then he gets shot. Well, the guy asking the question was interviewed later. And I just thought the fact they put him on TV as a witness to a murder, a traumatic event, he's probably an actor. Like, I really thought that guy has to, if it's a psyop, he's got to be involved in it. Well, someone found a video of this guy minutes before the shooting, and he's putting his hands on his head, he's shaking his head, and he's like, no, and he's like crying. Like, basically, crisis acting rehearsals before the shooting. We have two examples of it. Examples of people rehearsing their lines, an example of somebody reacting in advance. Andrea says, Nathan For You is a docu-reality comedy series where he studies people and causes them to make choices for gags. It's binge-worthy due to the psychological tricks he plays. Yeah, absolutely. And to the point that was brought up also about bringing other people into it, there's a show called it's called Space Cadets. It was a 10-episode series where a group of people thought they were going to space. And for 10 episodes, they think they're in low Earth orbit. But at the end of the final episode, the walls come down, and these wannabe astronauts start bawling because they thought they were in space. Well, people ask, well, how? There's no way they wouldn't have seen through this. They're just acting, it's reality TV. Well, no, the way it worked was only 5 of the people were wannabe astronauts. The other 5 were actors. And the actors kept the wannabes from talking to each other and putting 2 and 2 together. In other words, they stopped the conspiracy theories from happening. We don't want a group of skeptics to get together and form an alternative theory and say, hey, maybe we're not really in space. So to prevent that, they use actors to guardrail the conversation. Isn't that exactly what we see in Trutherville? They maintain the illusion by saturating the field with a bunch of agents and provocateurs. You try to have an opinion on the Charlie Kirk thing, no matter who's correct here. I mean, the fact of it is the only voices you're going to hear are the ones that are platformed, the multimillionaires, the big channels. And it's not a meritocracy. It's not that Candace Owens or any of these characters are just better researchers and we're following them because they're journalists, because they're not. Because everything that they've pointed out so far has been along the exact same predictable routes. But it's a closed system, and they don't want output from outside of their system because the outside content, the outside perspective includes, it might be fake, he might be alive. So it's just so what you can know from here going on, based on the hoax indicators and the evidence of fakery that we have thus far, anybody operating on the premise that Kirk is dead is lagging behind. Like, their opinions are irrelevant. I mean, we don't take the opinions of people who think any of these events are real very seriously. Mainstreamers, I'm like, let me talk to my mainstream friends. Hey, what do you think about this? If they even know about it, it's going to be headline deep. Low information believers. And conspiracy theories these days are really just, it's not that it's low information believers, but it's completely misinformed because their starting point is wrong. And if they can't let go of this idea that he really died, it's because they're stuck behind the bloody guardrail. The bloody guardrail might be the final one. There was false flags. We had to expose the false flag fallacy, that there aren't any false flags. But what gets people with the blood, I think, is emotions. That is the thing that gets them. And the visual special effects are very compelling for some people. But as I've been saying, you got to be a blindfolded skeptic on this thing. The visuals are going to get increasingly difficult to see through. That's a guarantee. I mean, I saw a video of a bear and a badger going through a yard, and a Halloween animatronic jumped up and it scared the bear and the badger, and they jumped up, and the bear runs and he bumps into a truck and gets knocked out cold and falls on his back, and the truck moves. So you have these doorbell cams catching things like the crocodile that try to eat the kid and the mom pulls them in. These things look super realistic. I can't tell. I've been seeing this video of this chihuahua running with a pack of wolves. And I'd like to believe it's real, but it's not. I was like, maybe that explains chupacabras. So now that we know that the magic show is only going to improve, we need to stop sitting in our seats. You know, that's what they're doing. The true believers in this stuff are not getting out of their seats at the magic show. And like, hey guys, I think it's real because from my perspective, it looks real. Yeah, I know it looks real on what they showed you on TV. It's curated. It's designed to look real. It's a very selective angle and everything. They have an interest in you believing it. Seeing is not believing in 2025 unless you're a brainwashy, mind war casualty. And not to mention the naivety. Like, at this point, it's naive. They used to say, oh, you're crazy because you're a conspiracy theorist. Well, you're naive if you're not at least looking in that direction. Soul 101 says AI videos are terrifying. They're quite literally indistinguishable. And we predicted this a while ago. I saw this coming. But I've also been emphasizing that long before digital deepfakes, the CIA already mastered deepfakes. Like, you know, it's completely within the realm of possibility that there's like half a dozen individuals playing Donald Trump. And it's not about, like, somebody put out a video like Donald Trump's now an AI avatar and nobody cares. Like, well, they might be using that for some content, but how do you fake it in real life? And that's what's more important. Yeah, it's easy to fake things on the screen, but they've been faking stuff in real life for so long that it's a pretty much guarantee that there are celebrities that we all know and love who don't exist. And I'm not saying I believe this, but there was a pretty compelling case to be made that Benicio del Toro does not exist. That it's a mask, a disguise worn by Brad Pitt. So he's playing a role, and then this role gets roles. Now, I'm not saying that's true, but we looked at it closely because there's some similarities there. But it is true that it's within the realm of possibility. Just ask the CIA Director of Disguise, Jonah Mendez. I think she may have passed, but she was 27 years in that capacity. And her interviews, which came out in 2015, came in the wake of these things being declassified. So as soon as they started declassifying hyper-realistic masks, they moved into the digital stuff as the main focus. And this doesn't just include masks, entire bodies. I went to this event at the state fair here today, and there was a security guard who was wearing the wardrobe of Anubis, the Egyptian god of death. So I'm getting patted down by the god of death. And the guy looks like The Rock, through the costume. And I get closer and I'm like, okay, fake muscles. A fake muscle costume. I actually saw one today. And I'm like, wait a minute here. We were talking about The Rock. He has all these accolades for his new movie, which I haven't seen, but apparently it's really good. But what they certainly claim here is that he lost 60 pounds for a role. And I've been suggesting that to preserve his health long term and to avoid the effects of the types of drugs needed to maintain that incredible size, to not get the pregnant belly and other things that happen with bodybuilders at that stage, I thought, why wouldn't an actor of his caliber simply said, give me a suit? Because if you notice, The Rock from WWE is leaner than the newer Rock in the movies. So I'm suggesting that maybe The Rock's been wearing like muscle jammies since he got into Hollywood. And that's not an extraordinary claim whatsoever. Unless you've personally seen him doing some feat of strength, you really aren't in a position to say it couldn't be done. But interestingly enough, the hype is all about how he lost 60 pounds. Well, Glenn Powell is in this football movie, and he's on the cover of GQ wearing a muscle suit. So did they just lend it to him? Here, you use it. I don't need it. Because now Glenn Powell's got 60 pounds of muscle, and it looks real. We talked about Glenn Powell again because he's in some football movie about some football player who prematurely celebrates a touchdown, misses the goal, and actually loses the game. A disgraceful mistake. Well, that movie just came out. And now this has happened a couple of times in a row, and the NFL is talking about it. Critterfest is here. Welcome, my friends. The show that never ends. Thank you for joining. And no, it doesn't end. One of the first things I realized when I got into this area is that doomsdays are built into almost all of it. It's all eschatology. We're in the end times. Whether it's God or the nuke or climate change, everybody who's plugged into the world stage thinks the world's about to end. A lot of them want it to. They want it to end. The QAnons for years were like, I can't wait to watch all the Democrats get executed by the National Guard on TV. I can't wait to see Hillary Clinton hanged. Like, they were just bloodthirsty, wanting to see their enemies punished. A lot of them do want the world to end. For some time, there was this group that were into the idea of a plasma apocalypse, where we're all going to get sucked up into a hole in the sky. I was like, you guys want this to happen? And then you got the September 23rd rapture crew every year. Every year, they're waiting for the rapture. And every year I ask them, well, let me house sit for you. I'll watch it till you get back. And none of them take me up on it. No soon-to-be raptured, ascended soul ever offers me their material goods before they go. It's like, sorry, you can't take your car to heaven. Unless you're Elon Musk, sending his car to space. Space is the new heaven, if you didn't know. Space is a replacement for heaven. It quite literally is that. It's a science fiction version of an archaic concept. but it's bigger than the other ones because all the competing versions of heaven from these earthly religions, they all believe in space. They don't recognize that by labeling it science, they really just repackaged something and gave it to them. So it's sort of like the true religion that even the people who are in it don't even know it. They don't recognize it as a religion. That's the cleverness of it. Like this Charlie Kirk thing. Was this a crime? Was it a murder? Was it an assassination? No. It's a contemporary myth. They created a martyr. It's essentially a religious thing. Soul 101 says, I heard the military is always 20 years ahead in tech, so who knows? AI has been a thing for decades unknowingly. You know, I hear that a bit. I would say that's mostly true with graphics and other things. It's certainly likely. But as far as the AI, it's in the process of becoming educated, and the knowledge base is relatively new. A lot of this content that's just been put online. So I think it's emerging now, but I don't know. Thinking about this makes me wonder. It's like, I'm pretty sure everything we're getting is stultified and slowed down at a minimum. But the thing is, like take the ISS, for example. The space station is still using Final Cut Pro from like 2004. It's still using crappy green screens. And when they started introducing augmented reality artifacts, they started screwing up big time. And I don't talk about the ISS very often, but the ISS bloopers are legendary. One of my favorite ones is on Earth Day. They have this inflatable globe that they're throwing around, and one of them drops it. And they all reach down for it, but they have like, you know, like leashed dogs. They got these bungee cords, so they can't actually grab it, and it hits the ground. It's like, I'm sorry, wait a minute here. You dropped a globe on Earth Day on the space station and it hit the ground? How come it didn't just float? Andrea says, Erica Creech, I knew a guy who was a movie extra, and he was in one of the Bruce Willis movies. He said Willis had to stand in a box for most scenes because he was so short. Erica Creech says, who saw Elon Musk being Trump's 100-day jumpstart man? Came out of nowhere. I saw it from The Madness. I watched the #1 show on Netflix, The Madness, and there's a character who's based on Musk who steals the election, who essentially wins it by funding Nazis online to get that vote, to swing it to the extreme on the right. But there's a Musk-esque character. If you didn't see The Madness is about internet content and memes that drives people to political violence, specifically right-wing memes. And the Musk character is accused of stealing the election. And that gets the conspiracy theorist, who perfectly correlates with Laura Loomer, it gets her whacked. Although looking at the playing field now, because based on that movie, you know, you could have said, okay, they're going to go after Nick Fuentes. And there was an assassination attempt, supposedly, if you believe what you saw. You did see Musk heavily attacked by the class warriors, the Team Luigi, burning up the Teslas and all that. You know, one of the guys that was burning or scratching Teslas, vandalizing Teslas, he had a shirt with an American flag with an eagle on it. Same shirt that Tyler Robinson wore to the Utah event. Interesting detail. But the show The Madness preceded Musk and his role in the White House before he and Trump broke up. And even the breakup between Trump and Musk was reflected in Mountain Head. And Mountain Head is about generative AI wreaking chaos on society because people can't tell real from fake. Sort of like how PSYOPs do. But now instead of just government PSYOPs here and there, everybody can do it. And we've already seen this. We've seen it with Ukraine, with 10/7, people mixing up video game content for war footage. But Mountain Head came out right as Los Angeles started breaking out in riots, and then you had the No Kings protests across the country, thousands of protests. So if you look at that, you're like, wow. And the character's even based on Musk, pretty much 100% openly. The timing of the releases are the big tell. Soul 101 says, Wojak memes radicalized many. People do largely get their information from memes, I think. Like, when I say low information believers, it's basically memes. It's all memetics. Virus of the Mind, Richard Brody, very revealing book. Richard Brody is the guy who wrote the first Word. So if you think about Microsoft Word, and then you think about, like, Windows, the Microsoft, the computer virus as an analogy for the real virus, it all ties into the mind virus. Because in Virus of the Mind, it's about how words create a mental construct analogous to a virus. And the premise of it, though, is that we can catch ideas, that you don't even have to think about it. You don't have to process it. That you can just catch ideas from your environment and who's around you, and that these ideas can combine into entire belief systems. Now, I don't particularly believe that's true with myself, but it may have been at some point in my life until I became a little more aware. That's why I describe this as mind war inoculation. Because if you're not actively consuming media, then you are a passive receptacle for mind viruses. And Elon Musk is the one who popularized the term again in recent years. It's like, we got to get rid of the woke mind virus. And a lot of people applaud him for defeating the woke mind virus on X. And it's like, yeah, he did. He defeated the woke mind virus on X. But he enabled and facilitated the woke right mind virus. Because the mind virus that they describe as wokeism exists on both sides of the spectrum. Whether it's Groypers or Antifas, Proud Boys or Soy Boys, what's really the difference? Same uniforms. But generative AI is getting increasingly believable. There's now sites you can go where you can prompt a 5-minute video. I mean, to me, this is a dream come true. Because I was working on animations. I have a script for Penguinati, and I was like trying to get animators to work with me. I had some. X322 did some tremendous designs that we're still pretty much using for the cyborg penguin. The story's there, but I just don't have Pixar money. And it's fascinating if you compare the budgets. Like, how much money would it cost to do the effect of hair underwater in 2006? And how long would it take? How many experts would it take versus today? And it's like, what would have taken many months and millions of dollars from trained experts can now be done by anybody with grok and a prompt. It's hard to overstate the significance of it and the power of it that has just been democratized. Like, it's still relatively new. That's why I think it's important to keep in mind as a consideration that if your sole methodology for seeing through fake news is noticing fake looking stuff, you're going to get lost. You're not going to be able to see through it in the future. The system is perfecting itself. You have to have the wider context and a recognition of the world stage model, what that entails, what that means, what history bending is, news bending, and the cumulative effect of fake news, and how that sets the frame of reference for every subsequent news story, and why it's inherently fallacious. Thus, history is bent. I say bent. And what we're doing here is we're recognizing the divergence, where people live mentally, and contrasting it with the real thing. You could argue that the IPS think tank is the only objectivist think tank on the internet. I mean, prove me wrong. Change my mind. Change my mind is what Steven Crowder says. The guy who wears bulletproof vests to talk to liberals on college campuses because he's such a free speech champion. He's definitely not LARPing like somebody who's that important that they might assassinate him. No. Steven Crowder is speaking truth to power. Like, what a joke. Performative. Like the body armor, it's all just performative. Performative courage and bravery. Soul 101 says, how long do they put out a full-on AI type movies in theaters? Right, complete with music and everything. You know it's in the works. I mean, if it's already happened, I wouldn't be totally shocked. Like if somebody said to me, hey, I'm breaking an NDA here, I'm gonna get sued, but I gotta let this out. The entire Black Mirror series was AI, no real actors. Just one guy in a laptop did it all. I would be like, yeah, that's plausible. That is on the horizon. But I think they're guardrailing it because they have to be cautious because this is their main source of power. The ability to rapidly create believable stories and influence the belief systems of the masses is their main power. And that's what they don't want messed with. They don't want real competition. Curtifest says, in the future, you won't deal with pain, not unless they can't afford monthly chip fee. Then they'll flip the chip off until you make your payment. They'll treat it like your water bill. Yeah, I'm waiting for them to rate limit how many steps we can take. A couple years ago, they put rate limits on how many tweets you could view per day. I was like, that's not enough for me. All I do is scroll multiple feeds. I'm always researching. The idea that you would artificially put a constraint on it to save the environment, it's like, okay, you can't take more than 6,000 steps a day. Your carbon footprint is getting a little too deep. Erica Creech says, what if the deception Frank the Salt Guy asked you about was a deception on our nature as either co-creators or something about reincarnation or something? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that there's levels to it, and you got the emotional, psychological manipulation. You have the false construct, which is just purely mental. But I think that might actually be a bulwark against some kind of deeper spiritual understanding. Because one of the things the dominant paradigm does is it spiritually castrates all of us. Because when you enter into this paradigm, you have your own belief systems to the side. But the consensus version, as far as what the consensus agrees upon, is that we're just a bunch of evolved apes with massive egos, coping with the meaninglessness of a dead universe grinding to a halt. Like, we don't have souls, if you go by the main story. And I'm honestly kind of a Gnostic, if anything. If someone asked me what my religion is, because I don't really adhere to any of the religions, but I do have a very Manichaean outlook. I'm definitely very Gnostic about it. And that's, to me, that's a result of my experience with the world. It does have these certain aspects to it and elements that make me think that, yeah, it could conceivably be the case that we're not simply from the mud apes with big egos, but that we're actually from above meeting the ape halfway. And that whether or not we're dominated by the spirit or the meat suit is up to our individual character. Like, are you beast or angel? It's like a tug of war. Are you operating from the higher or the lower? And I think you have that free will to choose. But I think that in the Gnostic sense, this place is designed to convince you you're a zoo animal. You're a domesticated ape at best. That's the idea of Gnosticism, is the world is an illusion that you have to overcome, despite the fact that all the influences that are around you are going to reinforce the idea that you're nothing more than matter. So what are you? Are you light or matter? Are you light, having a materialistic experience as you're going through this realm? And all the symbolism, all the trappings, all the various bits of programming kind of point to this idea of Saturn, Kronos, this dark god of time and matter that consumes life, as being the ruler of this place. And honestly, I find that to be very likely. Critterfist says, Tim, you went over your word limit. Let's all chip in and get Tim more words. Exactly. Anything they can. I used to say, if they could tax the air that you breathe, they would. And thus the carbon tax. Carbon taxation. Anything that you pay for Gaia. Like, oh, I'm an inconvenience on Gaia, so let me mitigate that by giving some money to the Church of Global Warming. And that is a religious thing. Every time you recycle, let's say you go to that green bin and you throw in your recycled goods, your recyclables for the things that you purchased that week. Well, you're actually genuflecting before the altar of the earth god. Very Saturnian. The recycling, death, rebirth, like the recycling of souls. I have these water bottles here, and it says, keep recycling. These could be reborn as a pair of pants. But essentially, yeah, the recycling thing is, if you ask me, it's earth worship. It's about the god of cycles, the cycles of life and death, Saturn, the cycles of time. Intelligent Counterspell says, I thought it meant you don't believe you know, Gnostic is knowing. Yeah, Gnostic is knowing. And yeah, that's kind of what I'm suggesting here, is that my personal experiences in this realm, whatever you want to call it, have definitely led me to conclude that I am more light than matter, and that consciousness, will, intent, these are practically forces of nature. They're a part of the bigger picture. We're not just observers. We're not just objects on an object. But I honestly don't even believe that the universe exists until we experience it. And I know that's not scientific. But the way I think of it is that it's this temporal experience is more of a process than a thing. Like, does the universe exist as a static construct, and that you think of the path from the past to the present as a road? Does that road extend into the future? Could you travel there? Does it exist? And we're waiting to experience it. I'm saying no. The road doesn't exist in the future. The future is just the acausal realm, as the Theosophists would call it, is just pure information that has yet to be condensed and perceived. Yeah, big enchilada. The recycle symbol does have the 6-pointed star. It's comprised of 3 arrows, which are like 3 nails. You could look at the dumpster itself as a cube, which does unfold into a cross. Gaia is a God construct. And what you're doing when you're recycling is you are acknowledging your sins. You're begging forgiveness. You're making up for them. You're doing your penance. Like, 10 Hail Marys and Our Fathers. Well, your penance is separating your bad decisions from your good as a consumer and making the appropriate sacrifices. Soul 101 says, Tim, have you ever had an OBE, or are you aware of it? I only have... I have a couple of thoughts on this. I think, for example, remote viewing is something that they used to call astral traveling. I only have one experience where I do think I was out of my body, but I don't think it counts because I was on LSD. I was in high school at the time, but I was at a concert, and I honestly was like looking closely at the stage and the singer, and then I'd open my eyes and I'm in the middle of the crowd behind people much taller than me. So I was seeing the stuff that I shouldn't have been able to see. But you can't count that. It's anecdotal at best. Erica Creech says, we are co-creating the narrative, maybe not the physical universe, and it's a clown show. Okay, so this idea of co-creation, I think there's something to it because it can be experienced on the individual level. And I don't think law of attraction explains it. I think it's a very watered down idea of the concept. It's mainstreamed. There may be something to it, but I don't think it's automatic. I think it depends on how active somebody is, how active their will is. Will is a key concept here. We're talking about intent, and specifically, I think there's this area here, like, so the faculty of the human imagination. I think the imagination interacts with that part of our, quote, soul. So let's say we're light, experiencing itself as matter. Well, we're not 100% boxed up in the meat suit. We are emanating. We are actually still existing at this pre-material realm or area before it materializes. And our ego consciousness is firmly rooted in our body and our sensory experience. And we can readily access our subconscious, we can have our internal dialogue, but the other part of ourself that encompasses the full spectrum of our awareness, not all of which is confined to the meat suit, a lot of that is outside time-space. It exists in this pre-created, this acausal realm. It has not yet come into be. However, that's where your intuition comes from. That's where precognition comes from. That's where premonitions come from. The intuition, your premonitions, precognitions, even telepathy, these would all be examples of information coming from somewhere beyond your ego, somewhere somewhat transcendent. And I think the human imagination, that our imagination is actually interfacing with the, quote, future. And I think this explains a lot of the ideas that people have about the law of attraction and visualizing things. Because when you're visualizing something, the concept, as far as like magical theory goes, is that you're creating something that now exists. It just exists in the imagination. It's not yet in the physical. But the stronger the mental construct, the greater the capacity of your higher self to actually align that within the realm of possibilities. So there's something to, I think, the imagination and this idea of co-creativity, or being a co-creator. And this would explain also the reason why it seems like one of the main purposes of this system is to hijack control of our imaginations and steer it, entertain it, and fill it up with their versions of what's to come. But the percentage of it, like the extent to which we are in fact engaged in this, yeah, it's very debatable. And again, the mainstream paradigm is that we have no effect. Your thoughts have no effect on reality. There are no coincidences that are more than just merely coincidence. Synchronicity doesn't exist. So this is where you get into this conundrum of, if you have experiences that you would call synchronistic, precognitive, or telepathic, well, you exist in a paradigm that does not acknowledge that these exist. So it's somewhat alienating, or it can be. And it's diagnosable. They've labeled it as illness. So if you see above or outside of the narrow aperture of your ego, you're diagnosable, they can lock you up. It's a perfect system to maintain control at that level, if indeed we are spiritual beings and that our co-creative capacities are being hijacked. But this, metaphysical speculation aside, back to what Erica Creech brought up, I do think that it's reasonable to suggest that what media does is not just it's not just control over us for political purposes, but there might be a deeper level to it. I mean, the mystery schools are really at the core of all of this stuff. The idea of a group of initiates and non-initiates, the people in the dark. Like, what if the main suppressed technology that we should be thinking about or looking for is not free energy? But what if the real suppressed technology is a thorough understanding of integrated consciousness? Because it seems like psychotherapy, psychiatry, psychology has us looking at the past in the basement rather than the attic, what's above. And I think that there's this analogy I kind of use, like if you think of it as a house, your everyday waking consciousness, your ego consciousness, that's the level of the ground. You got your basement level, which is all the stuff you don't consciously perceive, it just ends up down there. All the peripheral information and the programming that you don't acknowledge, it still gets stored and it's acted upon later. But I think above it, I think a greater part of our consciousness is actually on the roof of the house. It can see far beyond the here and now box that you're in. It can see a whole wide array of possibilities. And I think that the fully integrated self is the one that is in constant communication with the intuition and is fully reconciled with whatever's in the basement. But I think that we are conditioned to only look into the past. And one of the things too I noticed is that there's a lot of scammers and liars and cheaters around the whole field of what you'd consider to be psychic phenomenon. So nobody takes it seriously. And I don't care. I'm not here to convince anybody of it, but there were a few incidents that happened to me starting about 2008, where I realized that nobody around me had any kind of intuition that they could rely on. Like it's just a word. As in, nobody I knew had precognitions. And when I would discuss things that I would experience as intuitive flashes of insight, I would have nothing to grasp onto. It's like, trust me. Why would you trust me? I have no evidence. It's just a feeling. It's a sense that I can't even put into words, but it's just compelling. And there were a few times where I realized it was almost like, the way I look at it is this higher self, or the aspect of the self that's not integrated into the ego, can actually send you flashes of insight, if not guidance, if you follow it. So yeah, you say gut feeling. Maybe you feel it in your gut. Maybe it's a sinking feeling in the chest. Maybe it's back of the head. But people do have these visceral sensations that go along with it. So I've had flashes of intuition where I didn't know why, but I knew for sure. And if I were to say to the people around me, hey, I have this bad feeling that this thing's happening, they would say, you're crazy, ignore it. So I stopped attempting to validate my intuition off of people who don't have intuition. Like, why would you ask a mainstreamer for their opinion about the news? Isn't their opinion very blinkered? Isn't their opinion invalid because they don't have enough information? Because they're only the screen? Well, if you're only looking through your ego, if you only see through what your senses reveal, why should I take your opinion seriously with regard to extrasensory information? And there was a test I had, like I'm saying, I had a test, and I'm not going to describe it here, because that's not what this channel's for. But I do have a collection of such anecdotes that I have set aside for an unrelated book. But something told me to do something, to check on a certain person. And I had a number of clues that were communicated to me in a flash. And sure enough, I was absolutely right. That by acting on my intuition, I prevented this person from overdosing on Oxy and Ambien. Like, this person was unconscious in their bathtub. They would have died. And the only reason I was there is because I trusted my intuition that did not use words to communicate to me. So after that, I said, okay, this is life and death. This is more significant. This isn't something to let the consensus reality overshadow. So I started taking it very seriously, and I realized, okay, intuition and synchronicity are coming from the same place. And it's not coming from God. It's not coming from demons or angels. No, it's coming from an unassimilated part of the mind that has not been integrated into the ego, but that it's there if you can interact with it. I mean, what do you think prayer is? When somebody's praying, yeah, they think they're praying to the God of whatever book, but what they're doing is they're consciously trying to reach above their meat suit, trying to reach above the ape into this higher entity or being. They're reaching up. And I think that when you reach up, it reaches down. It meets you halfway. But I'm saying I don't think it's a higher power. I think it's an aspect of the self that has not been integrated. And that's what I mean when I say that the suppressed technology is the fully realized integrated consciousness. Carl Jung wrote extensively about this. So once I realized I was right, and I figured, I went through a few different periods of my life where I became very trusting of it, especially when I was in the military. That's when it really first hit me. And for a long time, I thought it was angelic or something. I thought I was dealing with something external. So in 2013, something else happened. And this was even more significant than stopping an overdose. And this involved a friend and a situation where I had a flash of insight about somebody months before I was proven right. And I talked to the mother, I talked to other people. I'm like, hey, there's something up here. And I try to explain to them the synchronicities that were showing me. And it's just like, they don't process it. Well, every single one of these documented, journaled, synchronistic flashes of insight were 100% on target. And I was able to act on it and prevent really bad things from happening. And what that told me again was that I cannot trust anybody else. That there's no human being that is going to come between myself and these flashes of intuition, because the information that I'm getting isn't coming from my five senses. It's not coming from my own thinking processes that from the level of the egotistical ape. It's coming from outside of my time-space constraints. It's reaching into the realm of possibility. It's showing me, or it's indicating what could happen should I not act. And that was another thing too that I took to be a test. I took it to be a test. The test was basically, nobody's watching. This is between me and this situation. And if I act on my intuition, it's like they say walking in faith. So it's almost analogous to faith. But instead of externalizing it, it's more about having a trust in your own mind and how it works, even if it's been constrained. So the false model, getting back to Erica Creech, this false model of our dominant paradigm, our consensus worldview, the world stage, it's designed, I believe, to allow us to function as simply animals. That it excludes all this other information. 91 Oki says, a sixth sense does exist. People can see the dead. Well, these things are hard to talk about because people have their belief systems that prevent them from understanding it. And I think that's by design. I think religion is here to keep you from figuring this out. Like hell and heaven and this stuff. Like, I don't know, maybe, I think that's, first of all, these are very simplistic concepts. But I don't think they explain it, because I can personally test, and again, it's anecdotal, but communication with the deceased. And I could describe it, but I'm not the only one. I've talked to a lot of people about this. And so to me, it's pretty obvious that life does not end with the body. The person continues to go on. And I don't think they immediately disappear. They don't ascend. They don't get beamed up. They don't get put on a bullet ride to hell. Like, no, they're here. I don't know how long. But what I came to conclude here, this is another one too, that the longer I spend around somebody, or the closer proximity that I am to someone over time, if there's an emotional bond, that's when I start to be able to have intuitive flashes about this person. You know, like some people know when their spouse is up to no good, or some people know when their spouse is in trouble, or there's someone they love is possibly in danger. Some people have that, they experience that. And I'm saying, yeah, that's actually something that can be cultivated and developed intentionally. And what I had found was that I called them soul bonds, for lack of a better word. And that these are the connections where your higher selves are interfacing at the level of self that is not yet incarnate, that is still in the realm of possibility, the future. But again, this is all, I think, beyond, if you want to know, like, what's beyond the fake news, what's beyond the worldview manipulation. Yeah, I think that there's a reason for it. If the purpose of religion in the past has been to spiritually gatekeep us, if religion has always been controlled opposition to spirituality, then why wouldn't media be the same thing? If media has supplanted religion, then its purposes are likely all the same. And there's not a lot of research or organizations that specifically deal with this particular subject. Synchronicity is one of our biggest clues. In fact, before I ever questioned NASA or the news, my experiences and thoughts on synchronicity had me really reevaluating my worldview itself, as far as not necessarily shape or any of that stuff, but as far as what this place is, because the normal accepted laws of nature and physics seem to be set aside for those moments of synchronicity where it seems like the universe is somehow communicating in a cybernetic loop with its perceivers. But again, it's not everybody at all times. And this is the idea of the theory behind, magic, is that the magician is one who cultivates this, makes it their business to be in a cybernetic communication loop with the universe and to be a cause of the effects. But that it's not a default. The law of attraction concept scratches the surface, but it just really amounts to wishful thinking, and it's a very watered down version of it. Now, this is, again, it's a topic that's not really talked about. It's gate kept, and I said religion gatekeeps. Well, if you look, where do you find this information? You find it in all of these organizations that require a great deal of secrecy. These predate non-disclosure agreements, blood oaths. So the people who know anything about this are in a very small circle of people as far as where the information is made nakedly available. Like, yeah, by the way, we've been given a very outmoded, restrictive model of the mind to work with. And you start thinking about models or operating systems. So the operating system that you have right now is likely not the same one you had pre-internet. And the operating system people had 200 years ago would likely be very different. And there are various things that upgrade it, but we're very mental, intellectual, abstract creatures at times. And our model of the world can be very fluid. And there's a lot of room there for people to have different interpretations and still coexist. But I think there's an optimal model here that says, let's go ahead and treat it as though consciousness is not a byproduct of our organs. Let's not start with an assumption that we're soulless and that life has no meaning. Because you can certainly live that way. And they give you all the philosophy and belief systems and nihilism and the culture that reinforces that. They make it very easy to slip into that. But that hasn't been my lived experience. Soul 101 says some animals have a heightened sense of that sixth sense when it comes to climate predictions. Oh yeah, I call the dog the weatherman. If I see the dog sitting at the door with his one foot up pointing and kind of shaking, I know it's going to rain. Or if suddenly I feel the dog behind my ankles, he thinks it's going to, lightning. Way before the news reports it. Dogs are funny like that. My mom has this dog. I think it's a Chihuahua mixed with, I don't know what it's mixed with, but it looks like a little wolf. But it runs out and it barks at the thunder. Like it fights back. All right, so what we're talking about here are models, because that's what the world stage is. You know, people use the phrase world stage. I often hear them using it, but we have a very specific definition for it. The world stage is the consensus version of events that presupposes the essential reality of all the previously reported news. So in other words, the broadcast version of reality that everyone agrees upon, that we're all on the same sheet, that's the world stage. And it's a combination of all the past events leading up to the now, and the now as it's presented, and whatever the media happens to be focusing on at the time in a very monolithic way. So it's the collective frame of reference, and even if you don't share it, it's the one that we're all plugged into regardless. Like, you may not believe in anthropogenic climate change, but if you want to pass your classes and score A's on your science quiz, yeah, you better at least pretend to believe it. So it's a belief system. It's not exactly objective. People think it's objective, that the news is objective, because they don't recognize that, no, it's in fact operating from within a closed system. You could in fact call it a fictional universe. We live on planet Netflix, combined with the Marvel comic universe, and a few other overlapping fictional universes. 91 Oki says, I'm so glad I didn't continue to film local news jobs. Yeah, the news is the news testament. If you look at this as a modern religion, mass media as a new religion, the news is like the news testament. It's essentially the Bible. It's the state-approved version of things that we all agree. Like, this is how it is. If you stayed in the news long enough, they might have put an implant in your neck and told you, hey, we're writing the news 30 years in advance. Don't talk about it and we'll blow you up. That's what Newsbenders is about. Newsbenders is about moving high up enough in the news agency where you find out, oh, there's a central world news service. The whole world has this central news service in all of the agencies, and their job is to insert historically significant events into our timeline. Like, that's not science fiction. And it's beyond news benders, it's history benders. That's why I'm so happy about this Charlie Kirk thing, because it's such a great exemplar of what we've been describing this entire time. It's a perfect case study in every way. Specifically about this point. Like, this point needs to be really drilled down, because this is demonstrably true, and it illustrates the point of it all. The Charlie Kirk thing was easily scripted as an event to occur 30 years ago. Yeah, 30 years ago, September 10th, 2025 was already planned. 30 years ago, easily, July 13th, 2024 was likely already in the prehistory books. Now, the history books that I'm describing here, or the histories and these events, they're all on a script, but the script is coming from so many sources, or it's got so many propaganda vectors, but the original source, the script, what are you going to call it? You know, some people say, well, history is his story, which is kind of a feminist cliche, but I think a better term is metascript. Yeah, 91 okay, and he's 31 exactly. Donald Trump's character, his historic personage that we're interacting with on the news every day, is a construct. Same with Elon Musk. Same with Charlie Kirk. These are constructs. Sunworks Extra says, by whom? Okay, here's what I can tell you. I can name names of people who are in on it. I mean, it's an easy extrapolation if you remove the presumption that the mainstream is telling the truth and that the conspiracy theorists are just finding additional facts. Now, if you subtract from the mainstream assumptions, you can arrive at some names if you want to do that. But I think we need to focus on what is it before we try to get into a whodunit. The whodunit question has led a lot of people in circles for many years, and none of them have figured it out. None of the J pillars or red pillars have come close, because it's not a whodunit. That's all they do. Oh, it's this group, and they get religious about it. It's like, you don't even know what it is, and you're blaming this group for things that weren't even done in the way that you think they were done. Like, this group did 9/11. Oh, really? Well, 9/11 was a horrible movie. It was a propaganda film. A bunch of drills happened that day, but nobody died. So who are you mad at? Who's the scapegoat for that? I mean, you can look at the Charlie Kirk thing. The individuals surrounding him at that tent would necessarily be insiders. So start listing all the insiders. Which influencers would be in the know and how much in the know. The programmers are largely programmed. I don't think they're all fully let out of the box. But there are indeed the programmed, which is the default, and there are programmers. Among the programmers would be various directors whose work is specifically used for propaganda product placement. So all these directors who have movies that foreshadowed 9/11, yeah, they're doing propaganda placement. Sunwork says, where do you go if you can't say whodunit? The whodunit question is dumb because you don't have enough information, and people were asking that question before they even knew about this. Like, if you're asking whodunit and you haven't figured out metascript or history bending, your question was premature. And one of the things that the conspiracy theories have done since the 60s, well, actually sooner probably, but one of the main thrusts of conspiracy theories is this group did it. So now, instead of figuring out the world stage Truman Show, they've got people engaging in conspiracy theories saying this group did it. This is our scapegoat. So the scapegoat puts you in a cul-de-sac. It's a non-answer. It doesn't actually answer the question, but it definitely diverts you from finding the truth. So yeah, I'm not interested in whodunit questions. It's usually a question that's a loaded question, so that you have these J-pill types. Because they used to come to my channel and they'd be like, oh, you talk about this fake stuff, but you never mention this group. It's like, yeah, because we've moved past that. You know, they give you scapegoat narratives to distract you. If you're still chasing scapegoats, it's a red herring. But I don't even care if somebody's like, I know who does it, who secretly rules the world. Well, if you can't describe the world stage, your opinion is worthless, because the people who are stuck on scapegoats still think 9/11 involved real deaths. Or that Charlie Kirk's dead. Like Candace Owens, this group killed, Netanyahu killed Charlie Kirk. Got to be careful around this group. Can't speak up against them, they'll kill you. It's like, Charlie's not dead. So if he's not dead, how bad is this group? How bad is your scapegoat if all of the things you're scapegoating them for never actually happened? Yeah, conspiracy theory narratives are all wrong. They all are. And there's conspiracy theories on the left and right. So the woke right conspiracy blames one group, woke left blames another group. So you could spend your life convinced that you're being oppressed by group A or group B. And everything in your echo chamber will reinforce the idea that you're being oppressed by group A or group B. 91 Oki says, yeah, well, the thing is, they disempowered themselves. Erica Creech says, Tim uses a piece of media, but I can't use the Bible to say Holy Spirit guides. Well, I don't use here's why I stay away from that, is that I look at the Bible and the holy books as constructs created by the same people who created the media. So why would I believe it? Like, I'm a non-believer. That's why I say I lean towards Gnosticism, because if any of what I've experienced is even a little valid, then yeah, there's more to the picture here, and this place is definitely inimical to spiritual insight. But I'm not going to say, if you have a spiritual experience, it must therefore confirm this particular holy book. I think it's very supremacist and ethnocentric, and I don't think it's true anyway. And I don't even get into these topics much because I don't want a religious war. I don't want somebody to shoot me in the neck. Like, just to be clear, I don't think any of the religions are valid. I think all religions are gatekeeping operations to misidentify parts of our mind as some external deity that the state regulates, controls, and essentially gatekeeps access to. I mean, one of the first things you learn in religion is that, I mean, if you listen to so many people or so many different religious teachers, you know, they have like experiences. God communicates with them, but it's always through this human medium. But the assumption is that it came from a higher power. And I'm just thinking that, no, I think that religion is there to keep you from recognizing your own higher consciousness, your integrated consciousness, and that you should instead externalize it to what this holy book says. And I think that's all by design. I don't have any faith in any religion or any priesthood or clergy or holy book, none whatsoever. And I don't think that makes me a bad person. It's like, you don't like Fox News? You don't like CNN? Well, it's the same thing. And I think religious people are deceived. Yeah, I think religion's a major guardrail. And I'm open to evidence. Now, I do have plenty of evidence in my life of evil. I do believe that evil is objectively real. And you can define evil in different ways. I do think that there is a presence built into this place that is designed to sever our souls, our connection to our higher self. It's designed to blinker our consciousness. I think that's 100% true. And I do think when I say evil, I mean, I do believe there's objective evil out there. And I'm not talking about just sin and bad behaviors, but I think that there are people here who operate from the angelic side of the spectrum of their consciousness. And I think there are others who operate on the more animalistic side. You could say reptilian. An example of evil, well, okay, let's say sadism, victimizing innocent people. And if you can't call that evil, there's something wrong with you. You know, I've had people say, well, there's only moral relativism. It's only evil because we describe it as such. Well, no, if you can't objectively identify evil, then you suffer from some kind of blindness. And one of these experiences I alluded to earlier that my intuition was pointing out was specifically there, I think, to introduce me to the reality of evil in the form of people. You know, people who are wholly and entirely possessed of ill, malefic intent, and who are completely there to destroy innocence. Plain Dakota says the world stage meta scriptures are evilers. Well, I'm not even sure that I'm not sure about this. I'm not sure. Like I don't have enough information. Look, that's why I say I'm kind of Manichaean about it. I do think there is an inherent struggle between light and dark, but I think religion works for the dark side. Look, I really do. I think all the religions work for the dark side. Lex Van Man says, Tim, are you RH negative? I'm not sure. Someone asked me that before. They said I need to take a test. Am I RH negative? I guess so. Okay, we're talking about evil. I mean, from the Gnostic perspective, it's very, very cut and dry. If the purpose of this realm is to blind you to your celestial origins and to reduce you to an ape, if you can describe that as evil, then you could say that the entire infrastructure that reinforces this paradigm is evil and to be overcome. And that's where Gnosticism comes into it. So from that perspective, maybe I'm an apostle of light here to put some light in the dark. Because one of the things that was shown to me back in 2013 was that if I didn't act, evil would have prevailed. There's that adage about all it takes for the evil to succeed is for the good to stand by and do nothing. And I feel like the great majority of people are in the gray. They're apathetic. And then a large number of people are operating from the light. They're inherently good. And this is borne out by their actions. And I put myself in that category. That's my trajectory. But then there are as equal a number of people who are bad, who are evil, with dark, malefic intent, who are here for the endarkenment. So you have two factions, endarkenment, enlightenment. And then you have this third group that has not made their choice. And I made my choice in 2013. That particular event, and I'm not describing it here, but I knew that that was a turning point in my life where I realized I'm going to now operate from this other side. I'm going to operate on the premise that this is good versus evil fundamentally. And I am, and looking back, I've always had some evil person in my life. Usually overt and a covert, usually one of each. There's always been, and when I say evil, I mean like legitimately terrible, bad people. Worst people on earth. And then this is where, I mean, I could describe it, but I mean, it's almost like, because I've been reading synchronicities, I've been following intuition for such a long time, that here's what I've come to conclude. That your ego, you have your internal dialogue, internal monologue, your ego has words, you can communicate with images, but the part of yourself that isn't integrated into that doesn't have words to talk to you. Your intuition may, but oftentimes it works by driving your attention to certain details. In other words, synchronicity. Synchronicity can be used as a language for your higher awareness to give you direct information about things that might not be or might be impossible for you to see from your vantage point. And this has been a constant facet of my life, but after 2013, I thought, okay, this is actually something that needs to be taken seriously and integrated because it appears to be leading me somewhere. So I went from thinking that I had some kind of angelic guidance to now completely dispensing with that and thinking instead, no, that externalizing it has been one of the major traps, and religion encourages that. Like if I were to describe these experiences to a religious person, and I have, they always give me the same answers. Like, oh, you need to read the Bible my way. You need to believe this now. It's like, I don't think so. I don't think I need to adhere to any belief system created by the powers that run this place. So yes, I do think it is safe to say that the people that run this place are in fact working for the endarkenment. Yeah, here's one of the things that's a little more startling to me though, because it's like, how do you describe it? Prophecy. Prophecy shouldn't exist. But what happens when you have minority report like experiences in your life? If you talk to normies about it, they tell you, take some medication, ignore it, it's not real, because it's outside of their frame of reference. And this is why point of view is so important. Look at mainstream minds cannot properly interpret a magic trick like the Charlie Kirk thing. To their view, it's a snuff film. Their perspective doesn't allow them to see it. But my perspective changed when I started incorporating a lot of this peripheral information. And it gets interesting because it seems like, oh, this is actually what happened is, the more seriously I took it, the more methodical I became about documenting it, the more it became a dialogue, almost a conversation. And this dialogue became a process of fine-tuning its ability to get its messages to me, or rather for me, to collate the contents of my mind rapidly enough to make sense of or to understand it. You know, this is an example of something too, of how it gets into this area where we have to be on some level capable of influencing outcomes, or there has to be a cybernetic system here in place where you can be somewhat, how would I put this? Like, here's an example. I was talking to somebody, we were driving, and I was describing how in the idea of the Bible, the Genesis, you've got the chaos, the void, the darkness, and then you have let there be light. So the idea of the word, so the word turning the chaos and it becomes creation. So the idea that this presence is creating through speaking or creating through the word. This idea was just kind of standing out to me. I'm like, okay, so there's this void in front of us that we think of as the future, but it's not actually a static extension of what we're in right now because it doesn't have form yet. It's just without form. It's void. But that when you say, let there be light, when you impress upon that void, then you become a creator. That's the idea of co-creation. So I was describing this, and as I was describing it, there's this graffiti I noticed at the street corner on this gray box, and it said, I am God. I'm like, I am God. So I was just thinking, okay, that's kind of interesting. I am God. Well, then I randomly stopped at a park. And randomness plays a huge part in all of this. Because I think there's something about random actions. And this is actually a huge part of chaos magic theory. Randomizing your actions as a way of breaking any preconceptions about what could happen next. So I stop at this park after I have this thought and I see the I am, and this truck parks in front of me as soon as I park. And its license plate stands out to me. It says John 146. Well, I don't know what John 146 is. So I'm looking it up and it says, I am the way. That's the verse. So I am. And I would not have known that John 146 was related to what I just saw or what we were just talking about a few minutes before. So now you have the added element of something in my environment seemingly reflecting and reinforcing what I was actually thinking about. So then, and I've developed this, I mean, this goes back further, because back when I was at UTEP, there was this library with 6 floors, and I started to really sort of experience this thing where the best way to explain it is, you know, that adage about when the student's ready, the teacher appears. It's like the information itself. If you're seeking out something, if it's on your mind, then there's this resonance with the realm of possibilities that could actually synchronistically draw it in. So here's an example, and this is a quick one. I was thinking about this idea, the jump test in the Matrix, the Fool. You know, the Fool card in the Tarot. It's this individual about to step off a cliff. And it's the first card, which is 0. It's the starting point. He knows nothing. He's a fool. And he steps off the cliff. And that represents a leap of faith in oneself, jumping into the subconscious. Essentially, the beginning of the fool's journey begins with this plunge. Well, if you remember in The Matrix, Neo, they think he might be the one. Let him do the jump test. And like, well, nobody passes the jump test. The jump test was when he jumped off the building. And they thought if he's the one, he'll jump from one building to the other because he has, this leap of faith in himself. But if you recall in the movie, he jumps off the building and he falls, lands on his face. Yeah, exactly, Matty Ice. That's what information is important. Morpheus, God of dreams, forms. So Neo falls. And then everyone's disappointed because maybe he's not the one. But that's part of the process. So, I'm thinking about this, and I'm reading this book called Name the Wind. Name the Wind is about the world's most notorious wizard. So I'm reading about, he's describing in this inn, he's like recounting to the chronicler his upbringing and how he came into his powers. And he's describing how he's at this school where the wizards go, and he's on this roof. He's 20 feet up. And he's told, you got to name the wind. You have to control the element to create a cushion of air so you don't hit the ground. So he's up there on the roof, 20 feet up, and the wizard behind him, the old guy, shoves him, and he falls 20 feet and lands on his face. So I'm like, okay, that's kind of like the jump test, but that's really what started his journey. So then I put the book down, and I'm catching up on my programming homework. I'm always researching what's on HBO and Netflix. So I'm watching HBO's The Boys. And on the particular episode that I was on, at the particular scene, the Homelander has his son on a roof. And he says, you're a superhero like me. You just need to fly. So he shoves his son off the roof. And his son falls onto his face. And the mother is aghast. And he says, it's only 20 feet. So I'm like, that's interesting. Because I just read about this young wizard shoved off a roof 20 feet. I turn on the TV. It's a young superhero shoved off a roof 20 feet. So the exact scene from the book happened in a movie, side by side, one after the other at the same time. So how does this happen? It happens because I was already thinking and focusing on this fool's journey concept. I was really dwelling on it. I did some art on it. So I'm thinking about the very concept of this leap of faith into the self. And so what I'm suggesting here is that the information that I'm focused on has resonance throughout the world. Books, movies, various scenes that would reflect that. And what my expanded self, higher self, whatever, what it's able to do is orchestrate these experiences in the here and now. So you're hitting this information, the information that resonates at the same time to convey this. So again, when the student's ready, the teacher appears. Well, the teacher is the information. I mean, the teacher is the person who tells you the info or the book that has it, but the information itself is what draws the synchronicity, which synchronizes your thoughts with your external environment. So my thoughts were then being synchronized with media around me. The book, analog, the digital, and the movie doesn't make a difference. So now that's an unconscious, almost passive process of just noticing what's occurring, but what is occurring in response to my thoughts. This is a cybernetic system. And if you research into magical theory, that's essentially it. That you can use your imagination to create these constructs out of just pure information that can, in fact, resonate with the realm of possibilities and can manifest in ways that seem miraculous or inexplicable. Like, oh, that's just a coincidence, is it? Because you could say it's just a coincidence. But what happens when you have these coincidences every day or all the time? What I started to conclude here is now synchronicity is not merely a passive phenomenon, but synchronicity is actually a feedback from what your will and intent has put forth into the future. So it originates with you. So this is where the manifestors get it wrong. This is where the law of attraction get it wrong. they think, oh, the universe is going to do this for you. The universe is winking at you. The universe is, or God is. It's like, no, it's not God. It's not the universe. It's a part of yourself that's integrated with the universe. You think God gives a damn about what I'm watching on Netflix? And if you look at the synchronicities and coincidental things that happen on a regular, these are very mundane things. And I would rather have God helping people that need help than catering to my curiosity. So no, it's not God. And that's one of the big misconceptions. And you know what made me realize this is I was watching this series called Swarm. It's a movie about this fan of Beyonce in a fictional form, this super fan. But she makes this, so throughout the movie, and it's not stated explicitly because it's like a horror movie, where this totally psychotic fan basically kills and does whatever it takes to get to go meet her idol. But she's constantly imagining it, and she's losing herself in her imaginations of meeting this person. But you see that she actually manifests it. She actually brings about meeting her idol. So much to the point where she actually, kind of a spoiler, but she bites her idol on stage. So now, this whole series, Swarm, though, is about essentially somebody who has a psychotic break, but who is, in fact, if you follow the story, manifests her desires. And one of the things that they say towards the end, one of the things she says, an enigmatic statement, she's like, what did you learn from all this? And she says, I've learned that God is an echo. And I was like, wait a minute here. Because for some time, I've been describing synchronicity as echolocation. You know how bats go through the dark? They navigate the cave by sending signals out into the dark, and then the signals bounce back, and it tells them where they can go. So they navigate by the feedback they get from sending signals into the dark. So what I'm suggesting is that your will, your intent, your focused will and intent projected into the darkness of the future, into the non-material, into the pre-material realm, that is a form of echolocation. Because if you're responsive to the synchronicities and you're in this cybernetic feedback loop, then yeah, it essentially is like echolocation for navigating your future, like you're a bat in a cave. Lost Age says the Magician Tarot card. Yeah, the Magician card is the first one after the Fool. And it has the guy pointing up, one hand pointing down. And what that represents man as a conduit for higher power. That we are in this continuum. And then on his altar, he has these tools that represent the four elements. You know what's interesting is the tarot cards and the symbolism are all actually encoded into your regular playing cards, your four suits. You know, your diamonds are pentacles. The clubs are staves. You've got the four seasons for the four suits. You would associate the hearts with the chalice, you know, the cups, and the spades of the swords. Well, that represents fire, water, earth, air. And there's 52 cards for 52 weeks. You add up all the pips, you get 365. It's all encoded into the solar calendar. Sync Kid says, really onto something here. This makes sense of understanding this machine realm. Yeah, that's what I'm actually here for, in my opinion. Well, I have reasons for thinking so, but you know, I mean, I don't have any sort of messianic complex. I don't have delusions. I'm strictly an objectivist. But if I were to follow to the letter my various intuitive glimpses, I get the idea that some of us here are essentially in this as a struggle, a fight, light versus dark. And you know, some will say it's overly simplistic, or there is no good or evil. And like, no, I think moral relativism is a sickness. And I think it's designed to make us apathetic, to keep us all in the gray, so that those who are operating from the pure dark can dominate. And they do win if they aren't directly opposed. And I think people have a hard time judging or wanting to recognize that, yeah, the world's saturated with evil people who will do evil their entire lives. Their purpose is that. Like, I think some people are light, some people are dark. And some people who are light go to the dark side. They lose touch with that. It can happen. It happens regularly. In fact, I think the more light you are, the more targeted you are by the dark. I don't think it's a coincidence that I've always had sociopaths and narcissists and control freaks and severely disturbed people around me. I thought, it's like moths to a flame. I'm like, what is this? And this is not an uncommon thing. Many people who have too much empathy or who don't regulate or constrict their empathy find themselves surrounded by the empathy deficient. Why are empaths or people who are people pleasers targeted, prized even, by manipulators, narcissists, and control freaks? Well, you have the people who operate from the pure dark, where their self is the highest. They're all about the self, no higher self, but no empathy, but rather they are essentially enshrining the self above, the ego self above the soul. So the people who are operating from the very materialistic and dark side of consciousness, I do think that they are naturally drawn to destroy the people on the other side. Let me go through your comments. Somebody asked me about, am I gearing up for Kirkteenth in 3 days? Yeah, I can't wait. I cannot wait. Gonna celebrate George Floyd's birthday. Armin Ross says, according to what you just explained about will and intention, won't seeing yourself as a fighter against evil bring evil into your experience as an echo feedback response to him? Not necessarily. I think, yeah. In fact, I think it's a necessary choice. Like, if you're going to make it a point to recognize this distinction and take a side, yeah, I think you have to accept that you will have opposition. Like, I find it very questionable when people don't have evil nipping at their heels. If people are having too good of a time and have no opposition and don't have a nemesis or don't have some immediate person in their midst working against them, I wonder, well, what aren't they doing? I think if you're doing it right, you do get opposed. And, that's kind of a Christian thing. I mean, there is a lot of wisdom in various religious traditions, but the institutions are evil. And their God construct, I think, is actually just a creation of government. And, if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. But if I am, nothing's indicated that. But what I'm pointing out here is that, no, I was already beset with this stuff. I just didn't become aware of it. Like, I didn't know about subtle forms of manipulation. I didn't know about subtle forms of psychological abuse. I didn't know about a lot of things that I just tolerated year in, year out. I tolerated many very toxic relationships with very disturbed people, and I just accepted it. In fact, I didn't even resist it. I didn't recognize it for what it was. So I think the best thing you can do is become educated about the other side, about manipulation, about darkness, about psychopathy, Machiavellianism, because when you're educated about it, then you can mitigate it or avoid it altogether. Lost Age says, we render as we go. I put out an intent to see 8s and it worked almost immediately. I saw 3 iterations of 888. 2 were license plate. I was directly behind. Okay, so that's fascinating. So there's various levels to this, because obviously people will say that's selectivity bias. They'll say that's your reticular activation center and you've just tapped into it. And that's partly true, but it does tell you about the power of your mind. That you can, so it's like AI. You put a prompt out there and it goes through its knowledge base and it serves you a response. So what you said when you said the intent, you put a prompt and then you get this feedback. And I think that for a lot of people, this feedback, this connection with intuition and synchronicity begins with numbers and repetition.